The good news of John, the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verses 9 to 11. Jesus says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." I love the way Jesus again and again and again makes himself the model from which we are to follow. He says, "As the Father has loved me, so I love you. As the Father has given me instruction and I keep that instruction, so you are to receive the instruction and to keep the instruction. As I am in joy because I am in the love of the Father and I am in joy because I keep his command, then you too can be in joy if you remain in me and keep my instruction." It's really simple, isn't it? If only. I bought some mange two. Is that how you pronounce it? Mange two? Mange two? Am I pronouncing correctly? That's a relief. The sugar snaps, thank you. I bought some sugar snaps this week. Simply because the wrapping had Zimbabwe on them. It warmed my heart to think that I may be contributing in some small way to the land that I was born and brought up and met and married Veronica and had two wonderful daughters. It just warmed my heart. But Zimbabwe is not the same place as it was when we were there. It has changed a lot. In fact, it will never be the same as it was when we were there. You've heard me say it before, and I don't mind saying it because it's just a fact. For 7 years after we arrived here, on and off, I wept with grief at our having to leave Zimbabwe. It was a painful experience. It's painful to lose that place that's special to you. The Lord has been speaking to me in the last week or so about places and people and pleasures, and so I'm cautiously entering that territory today. He's been speaking to me about having the right heart attitude towards these places, placing the right value on places and people and pleasures. He's been speaking to me about, just about this. I want to live in his joy, don't you? And we can. Jesus remained in the Father's love. Jesus kept the instruction of Father, and he was in joy. Was it easy for Jesus? No. Did Jesus weep? Yes. Did Jesus get angry? Yes. Was Jesus affected by what was going on around him? Yes. Were places important to Jesus? Yes. Were people important to Jesus? Yes. Was pleasure important to Jesus? Turn this water into wine. I'm not knocking places and people and pleasures. No. It's about having the right attitude towards them. It's about having the right heart attitude towards them. And there's some lovely examples through Scripture about how easily things can go wrong. The people of Israel headed out of Egypt, the place where they had been redeemed, the place where they had been released. God had released them from the slavery, the bondage to slavery, and they were heading towards the Red Sea. And they did what they did best. What did they do? They grumbled a lot. Masterclass of grumblers, these folk. They grumbled about their condition. So the Lord uses some snakes to bring them back to him. You remember the story? And many people died as a result of being bitten by poisonous snakes. And the people then turned back to the Lord. And they cried out to the Lord through Moses, we have done wrong. We have turned against you. And God says to Moses, so take a snake, make a snake and put it on a rod, and whenever anybody is bitten, that they should look at the snake and they will live. And it worked. Isn't that lovely? They got lost, they turned back, and they came back to God. And then what did they do? Well, we read in Hezekiah's time that when he was going through his reforms and changing and trying to get people to come back to the Lord, he destroyed the Asherah poles and he destroyed Nehushtan. Who was Nehushtan? The brass thing, the snake on the rod. They had taken the snake on the rod and made it something that it wasn't. It had become an idol for them. So it is destroyed along with the Asherah poles, along with the idols of the pagan people. The story is there in Numbers 21, verses 4 to 9. And I just love the fact that Hezekiah calls it Nehushtan. It's just a brass thing. It's got no power. So they're preparing to go into the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. Anybody like a bit of that? A land flowing with milk and honey. It just sounds delicious, doesn't it? Land flowing with milk and honey and mange too, from Zimbabwe. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, how many times did the Lord say to them, and when you go into the land flowing with milk and honey, do not forget me. Because what happens? It's so easy for us to be distracted, isn't it? It's so easy for us to take our eyes off God. It's so easy to take this brass thing and make it a something. And again, when they were in the promised land, they lost sight of God. They were distracted by the other gods around. They were distracted by the joys of what they had around. So there's Nehushtan, there's the land. There's the ark. Can't find fault with the ark, can we? How did they get into the promised land? They were led by the ark through the Jordan. The ark was a really important symbol of God's presence for them. They walked around Jericho 7 times with the ark. The Jericho walls fall down. The ark is just gaining in importance. They take the ark into battle. And on one occasion, when they're fighting with the Philistines, they get beaten by the Philistines. So what do? I know how we can get this sorted. Get the ark. So they send to Shiloh and bring the ark back. And there's a loud shout from the people of Israel. And the Philistines begin to shiver in their boots. The ark has come back to the people of Israel. What are we going to do? And the people of Israel's attitude was, if we got the ark, we got this sorted. What happened at the end of that day? Israel was totally routed, and the ark was taken from them. They had made the ark something it wasn't. And then we find the extraordinary one, the temple. He's not going to find anything wrong with the temple, is he? The ark story is in 1 Samuel chapter 4, if you want the reference. Jeremiah the prophet, chapter 7, warns the people of Israel. Because they had begun to say that as long as we're in the temple and we've got the temple, everything will be okay. Jeremiah chapter 7. Hear the word of the Lord, all you people of Judah who come through these gates to worship the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Reform your ways and your actions, and I will let you live in this place. Do not trust in the deceptive words and say, this is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. The temple had become something for them that it was not. And it distracted them from God. They were trusting in the temple and not... Thank you. And we find the stories continue into the New Testament. Jesus, as a young boy, comes into the temple, and what does he do? He's there to meet Father. And when his mother Mary and Joseph are looking for him, he says, "Didn't you know I'd be in my Father's house?" He knew what the temple was for. The temple was to meet Father. The temple was to meet God. And according to John's Gospel, when Jesus begins his ministry, he goes back to the temple, makes a whip, and starts angrily driving people out because the people had made the temple something that it wasn't. And then there's just the final story. There's that lovely story of Jesus with the woman in Samaria. Do you remember the story? Has an amazing encounter with a woman midday. And the woman begins to see that there is something more about this man than just any old Jew. And she says, "Surely you're a prophet." And she asks the question, "But you Jews, you Israelites, worship on this mountain, we worship on Mount Gerizim." And what does the Lord say to her? Do you remember? "Neither this mountain nor that mountain matter. What matters is that we worship in spirit and truth." John chapter 4, verse 21. "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." We lift our eyes to the hills, but where does our help come from? Our help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. The extraordinary thing is that God gifts us with these places. God gifted the people with the land. God gifted the people with the way to be rescued. But then people what can I say? I'll let you fill in the blanks. Place is important. I can tell you where I first met Veronica, where I first kissed Veronica, where I proposed to Veronica, and I'll leave it there. Place is important. I know the exact place I was standing where God called me. Brings tears to my eyes just remembering it. Place is important. People are important. I wouldn't replace Veronica for all the world. I wouldn't replace my girls for all the world. In fact, God knows he's got a competition on his hands. That's being honest. Places and people and pleasures decay. God does not. Places and people and pleasures die. God does not. Places and people and pleasures will disappoint us. God will not. Veronica brought Pete Greig to breakfast this morning. Not in person. But something that he had written, and I just thought, well, that's the hand of the Lord, isn't it? The way the Lord just brings things together. So I'm quoting from Pete Greig. Bless that man of God. He says, "Can I be honest with you? I'm actually not that into prayer. It's Jesus I'm into." So we talk. "I don't believe in the power of prayer," Pete says. "I believe in the power of God. So I ask for help a lot. I'm not into evangelism. I hate evangelism. I'm into Jesus. So I talk to people about him. I'm not into social justice. I'm into Jesus. So I talk to people. So I find myself picking fights with his enemies. I'm not into worship, Pete says. I'm not into worship. All those soft rock songs over and over again. I'm into Jesus. So when I see him, I smile, I bow, and yes, okay, I admit that I sing quite a bit too. I'm not into church. Have you seen the state of it? But I'm into Jesus. So I like his people. They're a bit weird, as I am. He's speaking about the vision is Jesus. And he goes on. Not Christianity, not rules and religious observance, not prayer, mission, justice, not church planting, miracles or mission. If you love Jesus, I guess you'll do all that stuff. You'll pray and worship and go to church and preach the gospel. But in doing all those things and pursuing all those things, too often we lose Jesus. In all the clutter of Christianity, we bury Christ. And then he says an extraordinary things. Some of us need to stop being Christians for a bit. We're just too good at it. It becomes habitual. Challenging stuff, yeah? Jesus is here, folk. And Jesus wants to meet with you today. He knows what your need is, and he wants to meet that need. He does. He takes you very seriously. Don't miss him because of the clutter around. Don't miss him because of the sausage plat at lunchtime. It will be hard for me. But Jesus is here. Don't miss him. Amen.